The sun, a fiery disk of indifferent gold, beat down on the endless expanse of the prairie. To Caleb it felt less like a source of light and more like a punishment. Every step was a fresh agony, a searing reminder of the price of betrayal. He'd left the gang 2 days ago, a decision fueled by a rare flash of conscience and a desire for a life that didn't smell of gunpowder and stolen whiskey. The gang's leader, a man named Silas, had a simple code: loyalty or death. Caleb had chosen the latter, or at least that's what he felt was coming for him. A bullet had clipped his side, a clean shot that had left a ragged, burning line across his flesh. He'd wrapped it as best he could with a torn piece of his shirt, but the blood had seeped through, a dark stain on the pale cloth. The world was beginning to swim, the horizon blurring into a wash of ochre and burnt umber. He stumbled, his vision narrowing to a tunnel of pain. He knew he was close to the end of his ride. He'd heard rumors of a small Amish settlement in these parts, a group of people who kept to themselves, far from the chaotic tide of the westward expansion. It was a long shot, a desperate hope for a kind of peace he'd never known. He collapsed near a small winding creek, the cool water a brief fleeting comfort against his fevered skin. As consciousness slipped away, the last thing he saw was a simple horse-drawn buggy, painted a stark black against the vivid green of the pasture. A figure stepped down, a young woman in a modest blue dress and a pristine white bonnet. Her face, framed by the bonnet, was etched with a mix of fear and compassion as she saw the dying man. Elara was on her way back from the general store in town. Her father had sent her for supplies, a rare trip that allowed her a glimpse of a world she knew only in stories. The sight of the man, a stark contrast to the peaceful countryside, filled her with a mixture of terror and a strange, unbidden sense of pity. He was dirty and dangerous-looking, a gunslinger if she'd ever seen one, but his face was pale with blood loss, and his breathing was shallow. Her faith was clear on the matter. To turn away from a soul in need was to turn away from the light. Without a moment of hesitation, she knelt beside him, her small, calloused hands gently touching his fevered brow. She knew the consequences of this act, the condemnation she would face for bringing an outsider, an Englishman, into their insulated community. But as she looked at his face, a mask of grim determination even in unconsciousness, she knew she couldn't leave him to die. With a strength she didn't know she possessed, she pulled him onto her buggy and headed for home, praying to a God that had already tested her resolve. Caleb awoke to a strange, unfamiliar silence. Gone was the wind's howl, the buzz of flies, the distant rumble of thunder. Instead, there was a hushed stillness, broken only by the soft clink of a spoon against a bowl and the quiet crackle of a fire. The air smelled of wood smoke, freshly baked bread, and something else, something clean and comforting, a stark contrast to the stale stench of his own sweat and blood. He lay on a simple cot covered by a homemade quilt, the stitches perfect and uniform. The room was sparse, with a wooden chair, a small table, and a window that looked out onto a barn. The door creaked open, and the woman from the buggy entered. Elara. Her face was serene, but her eyes held a cautious kindness. She carried a bowl of what looked like broth and a clean cloth. "You're awake," she said, her voice soft and melodic. "Lie still." The fever broke in the night. He tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through his side. "My gear," he rasped, his throat dry. "And my gun." "They are safe," she replied, her face a blank slate of calm. "But you will not need them here." She tended to his wound with a practiced, gentle hand, cleaning it with a bitter-smelling liquid and rewrapping it. Caleb watched her, fascinated. He was used to the rough care of his gangmates or the indifferent doctor in a backwater town. This was different. This was careful. Elara's father, Jacob, a man with a weathered face and a thick white beard, stood in the doorway, his presence a silent disapproval. He watched Caleb with a mixture of suspicion and resignation. He did not speak, but his message was clear. Elara's defiance had brought trouble to their quiet corner of the world. "He will need strength," she said to her father, as if pleading for his understanding. Jacob simply nodded, a tight, grudging gesture, before walking away. As Caleb ate the simple, nourishing broth, he began to understand the rules of this strange sanctuary. There were no machines, no bright lights, just the quiet rhythm of the sun and the moon. The only sound was the wind rustling through the wheat fields and the occasional whinny from a horse in the barn. Elara told him her name and about her family, her words as simple and honest as the food she was feeding him. Caleb found himself talking for the first time in years about things other than the road, the score, or the next fight. He was a man without a name in this house, just a patient, a soul to be saved, and for the first time in his life he was beginning to feel safe. Weeks passed in a haze of slow, steady recovery. Caleb's wound healed, leaving a thin white scar that would be a permanent reminder of his past. He began to help with the chores, a way of repaying the kindness shown to him. He learned to milk the cow, to mend fences, and to tend to the vegetable garden. The work was honest and hard, a different kind of exertion than the fast, violent life he'd known. With each chore, he found a new sense of purpose, a satisfaction in creating instead of destroying. He and Elara spent their days working side by side. They spoke of small things, the weather, the health of the crops, the coming of autumn. Yet in these simple conversations, their unspoken bond deepened. Elara would ask him about the outside world, her eyes wide with curiosity, about the things she'd only read about in books, the bustling towns, the trains that slice through the land like iron snakes, the endless horizon of the great ocean. Caleb, in turn, found himself captivated by her world. The way she moved with a quiet grace, the way her laughter echoed through the fields, the way she found beauty in the simplest things. One afternoon, they sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Do you ever wish for more?" Caleb asked, the question escaping him before he could stop it. Elara was quiet for a long moment. She traced the pattern on her quilt with a thoughtful finger. "The Lord provides all that we need," she said, her voice a gentle murmur. "What is more? More trouble, more noise. I have a home, a family, and a purpose. What more could a person need?" Her simple contentment was a stark contrast to his own restless, tormented soul. He realized then that he wasn't just healing physically, he was healing from a deeper wound, a sickness of the spirit. He'd lived his entire life looking for the next thing, the next score, the next escape. Elara, with her quiet strength, had shown him that true wealth wasn't found in riches or freedom, but in peace and belonging. He found himself thinking less about the past he was running from, and more about a future he never thought he could have. A future with her. Their hands brushed together, a brief electric moment that spoke volumes. The unspoken was now a powerful, undeniable truth. They were falling in love. The calm of the farm was shattered by a single chilling sign. A loose board on the fence was found re-nailed, but not by the simple, clean-cut nails the Amish used. This was a factory-made iron nail, a sign of the outside world, a warning. Caleb's heart hammered against his ribs. He knew that mark. It was a signal, a calling card from his old gang. They were close. His time of quiet peace was over. He spent the next few days in a state of high alert, his gaze constantly sweeping the horizon. Every rustle of a leaf, every distant hoofbeat made his muscles tense. He knew he had to leave. His presence was a ticking bomb, and he couldn't allow Elara and her family to be caught in the blast. "I have to go," he told her one evening as they were putting the chickens to bed. His voice was low, his jaw set. Elara's eyes, usually so calm, were filled with a sudden, pleading fear. "No," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You are still weak. You can't go." "I have to, Elara. They'll find me. And when they do, they'll show no mercy, not for me and not for those who help me." He told her about the gang, about the leader, Silas, a man with a cold heart and a reputation for cruelty that spread across the territories like a bad plague. "He'll burn this place to the ground just to make a point." Elara's resolve, however, was as strong as his fear. "We are in God's hands," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "You were brought here for a reason. To leave now would be to flee from the will of the Lord. And besides," she added, her eyes locking with his, "I will not let you go out there to face them alone." Just as they spoke, a rider appeared on the distant ridge, silhouetted against the setting sun. Caleb's hand instinctively went to his side where his gun would have been. The rider stopped, a dark, motionless shadow for a moment before turning and disappearing over the hill. Caleb knew with a cold certainty that they had been found. He felt a deep, wrenching guilt. He had brought this storm to their peaceful valley. Elara's hand found his, squeezing it tight. "We will face it together," she said, her words a promise and a prayer. The peaceful atmosphere of the farm was now thick with tension. Elara's father, Jacob, had noticed Caleb's restless, watchful demeanor and the dark, wary look in his eyes. He saw the change in his daughter as well, the way her attention was now constantly fixed on the door, the way her laughter had become muted. He knew her secret, and he knew the trouble it represented. One evening, he called Elara into the house, his face grim. "Elara," he began, his voice a low rumble, "you have been keeping secrets, secrets from your family, from your community, and from the Lord. I have seen the man. I know he is not of our kind." Elara lowered her gaze, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "He was hurt, Father. To leave him would have been a sin. And to bring a wolf into the fold is not. This man is from a world of violence and sin. He brings trouble with him, trouble that will not only endanger us, but could get us cast out from the community. Have you forgotten your duty? Your duty to your family, to our faith?" Elara looked up, her eyes filled with a fierce, quiet passion. "I have not forgotten my duty, Father. My duty is to be charitable, to follow the word of the Lord. He came to me in his time of need. I could not turn away. He is a good man, Father, even if he is from a different world." Jacob shook his head, his disappointment heavy in the air. "You do not know these men, Elara. They are not like us. Their world is one of greed and betrayal. They take what they want and leave destruction in their wake. I have been told by the elders that there have been reports of men on the road looking for someone. We cannot afford to have our family threatened because of your compassion. You must send him away." "I will not," Elara said, her voice firm. "He has nowhere to go, and they will find him whether he is here or not. We will face this together, as a family." Jacob's face hardened. He saw not only defiance but also a dangerous, unfamiliar love in his daughter's eyes. He knew he was losing her to this outsider, and it terrified him more than the impending violence. "Then you put us all in danger," he said, his voice cold. "And if the consequences of your actions fall upon us all, you will be held accountable. May the Lord have mercy on your soul." The day was sunny and calm, a cruel mockery of the turmoil brewing within the farm. A rider came up the long, dusty road, a man with a hard face and a cold stare. He was dressed in dusty, worn clothes, and a pair of revolvers hung low on his hips. He was one of Silas's men. He dismounted slowly, his eyes sweeping over the quiet farm, the fields, the barn, as if searching for a sign of disturbance. Jacob and the rest of the family were in the field, harvesting corn. Caleb, seeing the rider from a distance, had already taken cover in the hayloft of the barn. Elara stood near the porch, her heart pounding in her chest. "Ma'am," the man said, his voice a low growl, "we're looking for a fella, a tall man, dark hair, got a bullet wound in his side. You seen anyone like that pass through?" Elara looked at him, her face a mask of practiced innocence. "We see few outsiders in these parts, mister," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "No man has passed this way for weeks." The man's eyes narrowed. He looked at her closely, taking in her simple dress and her calm demeanor. "You're a long way from any town, ain't you? Seems a bit odd for a lone farm to be so far out." "We prefer to be alone," Elara replied, her voice unwavering. "Our faith teaches us to be separated from the world." The man grunted, unconvinced. He glanced towards the barn, his gaze lingering on the closed doors. Caleb held his breath, his hand clenched around a pitchfork, ready to fight for his new home. The tension was so thick you could almost taste it. The man took a few steps towards the barn, and Elara stepped forward, blocking his path. "Is there something you need, mister?" she asked, her voice holding a firm edge. "Or are you just here to bother honest people?" The man stopped, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. He knew he wouldn't get anything out of her. He was a man of violence, not patience. With a final suspicious glare, he turned and remounted his horse. "My boss won't like this," he said, more as a threat than a statement. "He knows this is the last place that fella would run to. He'll be back, and he'll bring his friends." With that, he rode away, his silhouette disappearing over the horizon. Caleb let out a slow, shuddering breath. He knew the man's words were not a hollow threat. They were a promise. The storm was coming. That evening, under the pale light of the moon, Caleb and Elara sat on the porch. The world was quiet again, but the silence felt heavy with the weight of the coming conflict. "You have to leave," Caleb said, his voice flat with finality. "They know I'm here. They'll come in force, and they won't stop until they find me. I can't let you and your family get hurt because of my past." Elara looked at him, her face filled with a calm resolve that surprised him. "And where will you go, Caleb? Back to that life? You will not survive. And even if you did, what then? You would be alone, with nothing but the dust and your memories." "It's better than you all getting hurt," he insisted, his hand going to his side, feeling the scar beneath his shirt. Elara stood up, her gaze fixed on him. "Caleb, listen to me. There is another way." She walked over to him, kneeling, so their eyes were level. "They are coming for you. My family will not let you stay as a guest, but they would have to accept you if you were not an outsider." Caleb frowned, a wave of confusion washing over him. "What are you talking about? Our community, our faith, is built on the family unit. A man and a woman, joined in the eyes of the Lord. An outsider is a threat. A husband is part of the family." Caleb's heart skipped a beat. He looked at her, his mind reeling. "You can't be serious. We barely know each other." "I know enough," she said, her voice soft but sure. "I know your heart. I know you are a good man who has been through a world of hurt. You have cared for me and my family, and I have cared for you. We are not a family of blood, but we are a family of spirit. The only way to save you, to protect us all, is to make you one of us, in the eyes of God and our community. It is a crazy thing to ask, I know, but it is our only chance." He looked at her, at the raw courage in her eyes, at the selflessness of her proposal. She was willing to risk everything, her standing in her community, her future, all to save him. It wasn't about love yet, not in the way he understood it. It was about rescue, about compassion, and about a faith so deep it defied logic. "Are you sure?" he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I am sure," she said. She stood, offering him her hand. He took it, and the touch sealed their strange, desperate pact. This was the only way to save them all. The next morning, the sun rose, casting a golden light on the approaching dust cloud. Silas and his gang were coming. Caleb stood in the open field with Elara and her father, who after a long, tearful night had finally given his grudging blessing. The entire Amish community from the surrounding farms had gathered. They stood together, a silent, unmoving wall of black suits and white bonnets, a peaceful army ready to face the coming storm. The gang rode up, a ragged band of 10 men on dusty horses, their faces hardened by a life of violence. At the front was Silas, a tall, gaunt man with a cruel smile and eyes like chips of flint. He dismounted, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, a look of amusement on his face. "Well, well," he sneered. "Looks like my boy Caleb decided to trade his gun for a pitchfork. And look at this, made himself a little family. You all hiding a killer, an Amish gang?" He laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Where is he, Caleb? Show your face! It's a waste of a good bullet, but I reckon I'll give you a clean death." Caleb stepped forward from behind Elara, his hands at his sides. He was wearing one of Jacob's simple grey shirts and a pair of dark trousers. He looked different, transformed. "I'm not going back, Silas," he said, his voice low and steady. "This is my home now. I've found a new life." Silas's sneer deepened. "A new life? With these simple people? You're a fool, Caleb. You belong with us. The road is in your blood." Jacob stepped forward, his body rigid with a quiet dignity. "He belongs with us now," he said, his voice surprisingly firm. "He is no longer a man of the road. He is my son-in-law." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Silas's laughter died in his throat. He looked from Jacob to Elara, then back to Caleb. He couldn't believe it. The woman who had given him supper had fulfilled her promise. The idea of a man like Caleb, a killer, becoming an Amish husband was so preposterous it seemed to disarm the violence from the air. Silas's face contorted with rage. "You lie!" he roared, drawing his pistol. "He's a thief, a murderer." "And what are you, Silas?" Caleb said calmly, holding his gaze. "A man who preys on the weak, a man who can only exist by taking what isn't his. These people, they live by a different code, a code of honesty, of peace." Silas raised his pistol, but before he could shoot, Caleb charged him, not with a gun, but with the full force of a man who had nothing left to lose. The confrontation was not a gunfight, but a brutal, desperate brawl. Caleb, unarmed, used his knowledge of close-quarters combat to disarm Silas. He didn't fight to kill, he fought to protect. He dodged the gang leader's wild swings, deflecting blows with his forearms, his movements fluid and efficient. The rest of the gang, surprised by the sudden unarmed fight, were at a loss. They had expected a shootout, not this quiet, brutal wrestling match. Caleb maneuvered Silas to the ground, pinning him, his face inches from the dirt. The gang members raised their pistols, but Jacob stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. "You will not shoot an unarmed man. You will leave this farm now. This is a place of peace, and we will not have your violence." Silas snarled. "I'll be back, you fool. When I get out of this, I'll burn your farm and your little faith to the ground." Caleb looked down at him, his face grim. "No, you won't. You will tell everyone you meet that I'm gone, that I'm dead. You'll tell them that I'm lost to the Amish, and you'll tell them to stay away from here, because if you ever bring trouble back, I'll find you, and this time I won't be as merciful." The threat was not empty. Silas saw the raw, quiet power in Caleb's eyes. He knew he was beaten. He gave a sharp signal to his men. "Let's go!" he snapped, his voice filled with fury and humiliation. They mounted their horses and rode off, a cloud of dust and defeat in their wake. Caleb got up, his body bruised and aching. He turned to face the community. They looked at him, no longer with suspicion, but with a new respect. He had fought their battle, and he had won. He hadn't used a gun, but his actions had saved them all. Jacob walked over to him, his face filled with a mixture of awe and relief. He put a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "Thank you," he said simply. "You fought with a purpose I have not seen before." Caleb looked at Elara, who was watching him, her eyes shining with tears of relief and love. She was no longer just his rescuer. She was his home. He had fought not for himself, but for her, and in doing so he had found something worth fighting for. The conflict was over, and the dawn of a new life was just beginning. The days that followed were filled with a profound sense of peace. The gang was gone, their defeat a victory for the quiet strength of the community. Caleb had been accepted, not just as a member, but as a protector. The elders of the community had held a meeting, and with Jacob's testimony, they had given their blessing to Caleb and Elara's union. It was an unconventional match, a man of violence and a woman of peace, but their love was undeniable, and their shared courage had forged a new path. Their wedding was a simple affair, held in the open field under the wide blue sky. Elara wore a beautiful handmade dress, and Caleb, dressed in his new grey suit, felt a sense of belonging he had never known. The vows were simple, but they carried a weight of a life of commitment. "I give myself to you," Elara whispered, her hand in his. "And I to you," Caleb replied, his voice thick with emotion. Their life together was not without its challenges. Caleb had to learn to live in a world without guns, without the quick judgment of the open road. He struggled with the silence at first, the quiet moments that forced him to confront his past. But Elara was always there, her hand in his, her quiet strength a constant anchor. She taught him to find beauty in the small things, the way the light hit the fields in the morning, the taste of fresh milk, the warmth of a fire on a cold night. He, in turn, showed her the world through his eyes, telling her stories of the stars and the vastness of the land. One evening, they sat on the porch, watching the stars bloom across the sky. Caleb reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "I never thought I'd have this," he said, his voice a low rumble. "A home, a family, a future." Elara leaned her head on his shoulder. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," she said, her voice soft. "He brought you here to be healed, and I was brought here to heal you, to save you from the life that would have taken you. You are my husband now, Caleb, and you have repaid me in a way you can never truly know. You have given me a life I never thought I would have either." He held her close, a man who had once been nothing but a shadow on the horizon. He had traded his gun for a plow, his freedom for a promise, and his violent past for a peaceful future. The gunslinger had found his true home, not on the open road, but in the quiet, loving embrace of an Amish woman who had given him supper and asked him to stay forever.